Okay, we're recording. All right.
Wonderful.
Welcome to Empowering Minds Mental Health Podcast, where we will discuss personal growth and well-being today. Mimi is a certified financial education instructor and a shame-free money mentor. She is passionate about helping people organize their financial lives to align with what they value most and experience more joy daily. Between May 2019 and July 2020, she paid off $20,881 of debt without sacrificing what brought her joy. And she did it all while working mostly part-time at a small nonprofit making $16 an hour. Mimi has a special way of teaching about money that helps people understand and feel good about their choices. Prepare for a helpful talk that will change how you see money. Mimi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to get to chat with you today.
Me too. I'm excited. Absolutely. All right, so we're going to jump right into some questions.
Yeah,
All right.
sounds great.
Okay. So, what makes us all a little weird about money, and what can we do about it?
It's so funny. I think it's such a great question because we are all a little weird about money, right? We
Hmm.
all kind of interact with this thing um, that touches every aspect of our lives, and every single one of us has to interact with money. It's not something
Yeah.
that, you get to pick and choose. And yet, despite the fact that all of us have to use it, all of us have to interact with it, all of us have it touch all these different parts of our lives, we don't talk about it. And it's
Hmm.
so taboo to even bring up. And a lot of societies and cultures, just do not discuss finances. It's just not even a thing you're allowed to talk about.
Hmm.
And so, one of the things that I always try to emphasize is the fact that no one is born knowing how to manage money. No one is, brought into this world going, I know how to, make sure I balance a spreadsheet. Like that, none of us know how to do that.
Right.
So it's a skill that we all have to kind of learn and practice over time. And thankfully, we're in a place now where we have so much information at our fingertips, and we can start learning those skills and teaching ourselves those skills or learning it from other people. So, I think the reason that we're all really weird about money is because it's so taboo, and it really doesn't have to be.
Hmm.
There's so many other things that are out there in this world that at one time were taboo and now they're not. Cancer is a great example of that. There was a time period where you just didn't even say that word. And now it's
Right.
something that we all, talk about. And it's something that impacts a lot of different people. Everyone knows someone who's been impacted by cancer,
Hmm.
but money impacts even more of us.
Yeah.
So I think the more we talk about it, the easier it is. And I worked in a nonprofit for a long time where we always said, what is mentionable is manageable. If you can talk about it, you can deal with it. And that's really the perspective I'm coming from when it comes to personal finance.
Gotcha. That's why I'm so happy that you accepted my invitation because I think that having you on can help increase like financial literacy, help to change mindset, develop healthy financial habits, and like you say, communicate openly and address these issues. So I think that we can cultivate healthier and more rational relationships with money when we actually talk about it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. All right. So, what do people need to master to get good with money?
So I love this question because I see so many folks who kind of spin their wheels a little bit, getting into all of these things that really aren't helpful or don't really get them very far. It's fine if you want to, focus on, clipping coupons and saving as much as you can at the grocery store, or if you're trying to, do different things to, try to increase your income, side hustling, all that. And that's all fine and good. But as a financial educator for me, I realized that there are these kind of foundational basic steps that everyone, it doesn't matter your income, it doesn't matter your lifestyle, that you can master these things in order to get better with money. And coincidentally, this framework that I am looking at is something that sort of came to me one evening For the longest time, I was talking with clients, and they would inevitably, at some point along in the journey, they'd say, "Oh man, I can't believe it's taken me so long to finally get a handle on my money.
Mm-hmm.
I just am finally getting to this place. And why did it take me so long to get here?" And my reply would always be, because you are climbing all these other mountains.
Mm-hmm.
You're climbing the mountain of education, and you're climbing the mountain of, relationships, and climbing the mountain of professional career, and the mountain of parenting, right? And all
Yeah.
these mountains that we're climbing in our lives. And so the fact that you're here now at the base of the money mountain, I'm just so happy that you're here now. Like, let's celebrate that. So it came to me that the money mountain is really these basic foundational steps.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, we have to start with our survival needs, those basic survival needs. If I talk to you about, IRAs or high yield savings accounts, none of that's going to matter if you don't have a safe place to sleep at night, if you don't have
Yep.
food 3 times a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once we kind of get those basic survival needs met, the next step on the money mountain is really looking at your mindset and your values. What do you
Mm-hmm.
believe about money? What stories do you have about money? And then
Mm-hmm.
what's important to you? What is it that makes your life worth aligning your money to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once we kind of master that, then the next real big piece of it is looking at your real numbers.
Yep.
And so many people, I think, are trying to aim for a certain goal or trying to aim for a certain ideal, and they haven't mastered their real numbers yet. They don't really know what their income is. They don't really
Mm-hmm.
know what their expenses are, including those, some of those fixed expenses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because even fixed expenses can change a little bit.
Yeah.
And then after we kind of get those two pieces, put together, the next step is really looking at your goals and your circumstances. Because what's a goal for you may not be a goal for me.
Mm-hmm.
The circumstances you face in life may not be circumstances I'm facing in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once we kind of understand all that, then finally we can get to that building wealth phase. And that's really that part of the money mountain that's focused on saving and investing and joyful spending, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, so many folks try to jump to that top piece. And
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have a strong foundation underneath it, they never really get very far because they haven't been able to master their mindset. They haven't been able to really get clear on what their goals are or understand, hey, yeah, I'm told I make this income, but I also have to pay taxes and I have to pay insurance and I have to eat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is those basic foundational pieces. And when we can master those things, we're not spinning our wheels. We're not getting sidetracked by stuff that's the shiny, flashy thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
For a while it was NFTs and crypto and, all this other
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Those foundational pieces are what really matters in the grand scheme of thing, because once you start there, you don't have to worry about trying to, find the next right answer. You're on a path that's going to prove out over time to be successful for
Mm-hmm.
you.
So you are a great well, not coach, instructor. And the reason
Thank
I'm
you.
saying that is because my sister's a financial analyst for the government, right?
Hmm.
And she kept telling me about this S&P 500 funds.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know what that is. So I called my financial advisor through Vanguard and they gave me some
Oh,
education
good.
about what that, looked like.
Yeah.
But the key component, she went back to some of the same things you just said. She said, Jennifer, let's review over your finances. Let's review over what you have in savings. Let's get to the basics. Let's get back to your budget. Then we
Hmm.
can make a better determination about how to increase your contribution. I hadn't even thought
Right.
about that. In my mind, I'm thinking, nope, I want to do the S&P 500. And that's what we're going to do. But it made more sense. So now I committed to doing a financial check-in every 6 months instead
Oh,
of
good.
once a year. So the same thing you said,
Oh,
she gave me
yay.
the same information. It kind of just brought me back. And I was like, hmm, I hadn't even taken that into consideration. Hopefully next month I will be debt free. So I don't
Oh.
think I had even gotten that far to like, okay, I'm going to have this amount of money
Hmm.
now. But what am I going to do with it? I hadn't even thought that far
Right.
ahead. So that's when she brought me back down to the budget. So that was
I'm
very
so
good
glad to hear
information.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's so funny because when we don't learn to read, right? When we learn to read, we start with our ABCs. We start with like learning what the letters are and making
Hmm.
meaning of what each of those letters are and what sounds do they make. It's kind of the same with finance. I'm
Yeah.
not expecting anyone to go from being very avoidant of their checking account and of their banking, accounts to suddenly being like a CPA. That's never the
Right.
expectation. If I can
Absolutely.
do anything to help you, it's to get those foundational skills. So none of that is scary to open your bank account and say, I wonder what is this S&P 500 thing that people are telling about?
Yeah.
What does that even mean? Right? So that's really
Right.
what, we're trying to accomplish here.
Absolutely. All right. So in my consult with you, I was talking about the mental health aspect of
Yeah.
finances and how sometimes when you don't know how to manage your money properly, that can start to cause, stress because you're wondering how you're going to pay these bills. You're going from
Mhm.
paycheck to paycheck. So, what can we do to break the cycles of shame, guilt, and anxiety around personal finance?
Yeah. And I want to acknowledge the fact that we, many of us, have experienced a lot of different kinds of financial traumas,
Hmm.
right? I want to just acknowledge that right off the bat. So,
Absolutely.
some folks have experienced poverty, some folks have experienced homelessness, some folks
Hmm.
have experienced, going to bed hungry, right?
Yeah.
Or we just watched our parents work so hard for very little money. And
Hmm.
I do not ever want to downplay those things. But I also want to recognize the fact that when we become adults, the traumas that we experienced as children do stick with us, but that's not necessarily the reality that we're still steeped in.
Hmm.
So I see a lot of folks who they experience those things in their childhood or young adulthood, and their reality now is very different, but they're still operating as though they're in those same conditions. And that's kind of normal. We kind of expect that that's going to happen, right?
Hmm.
So, one of the ways that I really work to help folks kind of get out of that mindset and get away from seeing themselves back in those positions is to start with forgiveness. I
Hmm.
think forgiveness is so important, and not just forgiving yourself, but forgiving the situation you were in, forgiving the people that raised you, even if they were trying their best,
Hmm.
they were doing the best that they could.
Hmm.
Sometimes we would see folks do things that just didn't make logical sense to us, right?
Hmm.
And all of us make money mistakes, every single one of us. I know
Yeah.
I definitely have. I was told, hey, at the end of your um, college educational program, you're going to be going to teach in a classroom every day, 5 days a week, and it's an unpaid internship. And it just never occurred to me when I'm hearing this, like, oh, maybe I should save some money for that. Like, I'm not going to have a job. I'm not going to be
Yeah.
able to have a job. So what am I going to do for money? It never occurred to me. And so I furthered my debt. I mean, I had some debt, but I furthered my debt during that time because I
Hmm.
didn't save. So I also recognize that the person that I was in those moments when I made those money mistakes, she was doing the best that she could
Hmm.
with the information that she had at the time, right? I was very money avoidant for a very long time.
Hmm.
And, I was also trying to help my family. I was also working, more than full time and going to school and doing
Hmm.
everything that I could, right?
Hmm.
So forgiveness is kind of that very first step.
Hmm.
I think also doing that reality check of like, where are we? I had a client that I was working with, and they were terrified that they were going to just lose it all one day, that they were going to end up with, completely no money, no, homeless. They were going to not. And we started kind of talking through things. And I said, okay, let's look at the reality of this situation that you're in. When we look at what you've already invested, if we look
Hmm.
at, the supports that you have in your life,
Hmm.
when we look at the money that you're making and the career that you're in, the likelihood that you will actually end up homeless, unable to pay your bills, unable to take care of yourself, the likelihood of that is really, really small, if non-existent, because
Mm,
you have all these things in place. So sometimes that reality check is really important, and that's where you
yeah.
can have a professional kind of help you do that
Mm-hmm.
reality check. But I think to really break those cycles of shame and guilt and anxiety, it's understanding where you are now and all of the things that you have available to you to make
Mm-hmm.
sure you don't ever go back to those places that you were, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if those situations were very, very, very real,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, there's no guarantee that that's what we have to go back to.
Absolutely. No, personally, I had to really start at some small steps towards my financial goals. And well, I'll be honest, I was kind of embarrassed to really even talk about the financial things I had kind of gotten myself into. Like I had furthered my debt, like you said. But
Hmm.
by taking those small steps, it helped me to gave me like a boost in my confidence. And then I
Right.
started having a sense of like financial peace when I started seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, like, okay, I'm gonna have to cut back on this and I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to do some things different. So once I started doing different things and I started seeing, oh my gosh, I got credit card one paid off.
Yeah.
That was the biggest win for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And to your
absolutely.
point, there's a great Joan Baez quote that says, "Action is the antidote to despair." When we start taking action on things,
Mm-hmm.
that relief kind of comes along with it.
Yep.
We think that we have to kind of feel comfortable first and then we can take action. And no, it's actually the comfort comes along with taking action
Mm-hmm.
and moving forward. So I love
Absolutely.
that. I love that example.
Yeah. All right. So, what what can people do to stop spending money in ways they later regret, and how can they set financial boundaries?
Yeah. Okay. So this
Ouch.
is a great topic. Oh, I love it. And the reason that I love this is because this taps into something that is like one of my favorite things I get the most excited to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
and that is around spending triggers. So spending triggers are essentially urges that you have to spend money in ways that are it's two qualifications. It's unplanned and unnecessary.
Yep.
So like say for example you're driving down the road, you get a flat tire, right? You got to go get a new tire. That certainly wasn't that was unplanned, but it was definitely necessary. So that's not a
Yeah.
spending trigger. A spending trigger is when you're like walking through the store and you see that cute pair of shoes and you didn't plan on buying new shoes today. You weren't really thinking about it and you're just like, "Ooh, I'm going to just go ahead and get these," right? That's kind of what I'm talking about. And the thing that really kind of ruffles my feathers is a lot of people talk about spending triggers as these sinister, evil impulses that are just, out to ruin your day and make things harder and just stop you in your tracks from, making progress. And that is so wrong because what they advocate is really trying to resist and fight and, try to do everything you can to stop your spending triggers.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is when we try to fight and resist our spending triggers, instead of giving in and buying whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
we end up in this cycle where we feel this tension and this tightness. And then, inevitably we're just like, I'm over it. I can't deal with these
Mm-hmm.
feelings anymore of not buying anything. And then we kind of go on a binge. To my mind, the way that I have seen spending triggers play out is that they are actually informants of our needs and desires.
Mm-hmm.
Their job is to say, hey, you've got this need. Hey, you've got this want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to point it out. Unfortunately, the way that we have been trained to meet our needs is through consuming, is through buying.
Mm-hmm.
So for many of us, what we need to be able to do is to start recognizing what spending triggers we have,
Mm-hmm.
and then we need to learn to listen to them differently. Instead of giving in to them, instead of trying to fight or resist them, there's an alternative, which is to sit and ask questions. What is it that the spending trigger is trying to communicate with me? What
Mm-hmm.
need is it bringing up? Is it trying to show me? So, for instance, I have a huge hunger spending trigger. I do not make good decisions when I'm hungry. I can't think clearly when I'm hungry.
Same.
So I have to be really good about listening to that spending trigger and saying, wait a minute, I don't actually want to buy this face cream, right?
Mm-hmm.
That, I'm seeing while I'm walking through Target. I actually am realizing, oh, wait, I have not had lunch yet and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon,
Uh-huh.
right? I also have had to learn to build in some systems to help me listen to my body's hunger cues better. And I've also
Mm,
had to learn how to kind of preempt those things. So, like, I take a little snack bar in my purse everywhere I go. I always have my bottle of water because if
mm-hmm.
I don't make good decisions and I don't listen to my body's hunger cues. So,
Mm,
for me, those spending triggers are something that we can really use and leverage to understand ourselves better. And when we do that and we really listen to them, suddenly those impulses to spend in regrettable and forgettable ways
mm-hmm.
starts to dissipate. And you asked about financial boundaries. So I want to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
I cover that too, because financial boundaries is something that's been coming up a lot lately
Mm-hmm.
for my clients. And I think one of the reasons that we have a hard time setting financial boundaries is because we're not always sure what they are. We're not sure
Mm-hmm.
what our boundaries are or should be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I like to go with these four essential questions. And the questions are, am I ready? Am I willing? Am I able? And do I want to? So if the answer is no to any of those four questions, then the
Mm-hmm.
answer is no, right? So
Mm-hmm.
let's say like your brother, your sister, relative, somebody close to you comes and they say, "Oh, I'm in a hard place. Could you just spare me? Like I need like $1,000 to get me through to the next paycheck. I'm really struggling. Can you help me out?" Right? And maybe you are brought up in a household where
Oh,
you know you always help out family. If family's in a
yeah.
a bind, you always help out family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now especially I'm speaking as an eldest millennial daughter, right? Like I know what it's like to have that pressure of feeling responsible for everybody else. And
Mm-hmm.
so you know if you are raised that way, it can be kind of hard to
Yeah.
suddenly say, wait a minute, let's stop. So for me, I have my own boundary around lending money, which is if I'm going to lend money, it's a gift. If they pay me back, great. If not, I
Yeah.
don't expect it. It's not the end of the world. But I have to check in with those four questions. So let's say, they come to you, they ask for that money, and you go, well, okay, yeah, I'm ready. I've got that money in the bank. Okay, I'm able. I could make it work. It would be okay. You know, I'm willing to help them out because I
Mm-hmm.
care about them, right? But then you kind of sit with it and you go, you know what? I don't really want to.
Uh-huh.
That is okay, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
okay because then the answer is no, you cannot lend the money because it doesn't, this not wanting to is just as important as those other three questions. And there are so many times too that folks will be generous and they're trying to help and they're trying to do things for other people. Number one, forgetting that sometimes rescuing other people is a detriment to them,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And we also have to remember that if helping someone else puts you in a bind, you're not really actually helping them.
Mm-hmm.
You're really not. And so for me, I really always say, let's check the budget. Let's check in on how we're feeling internally. Let's check in on what's going on. And remember that, you know, financial boundaries aren't really about saying yes or no, a hard line one way or the
Right.
other. It's a series of gates and fences,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so anytime those emotions come up when you're like, oh God, I wish or why did I give them that money? Or why aren't they paying me back? That tells you that a boundary that you did not
Yep.
acknowledge is
Mm-hmm.
there and you let it be crossed. So I think it's really important that we start having those conversations about our boundaries and with couples in particular, getting on the same page about your financial
Yeah.
boundaries. It's going to take time to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really important discussion to have when you're starting to get closer and comfortable about
Mm-hmm.
talking about money. And that should be early on in the relationship.
Thank you for your answers. So Saturday, I was in Walmart and my intention was to go in there and buy some vitamins. I've been on these same vitamins for a long time. Now, how I ended up from the wellness section over to the jean shorts, I have no idea. So I get over there and I'm finding all these cute little shorts. And I was like, oh, I like the light ones, the dark ones. So I have like 4 or 5 pair of shorts. And then I look at the shorts and I'm like, I didn't come in here for this. I didn't even need them.
Hmm.
But I, the light bulb just went off. Girl, you came in here for some vitamins. You have 5 pair of shorts. You are about to spend money that you really don't need to spend. You don't need shorts.
Hmm.
I get home and I'm separating my clothes. I'm like, I already had these shorts anyway from last summer.
Yeah.
So I really did. I just acknowledged then, like, I need to stay focused. So what I do, typically what I do is I have a list. So whatever's on that list,
Hmm.
I check it off. But that Saturday, I was slipping. I didn't have a list.
Yeah.
So I have to be more mindful to stick to my list. And thank you for the boundary questions. I never thought about it that way. Am I ready? Am I willing? Am I able? And do I want to do it?
Yeah.
That's good
Yeah.
sound advice. I really
And
like
I'm
that.
s- I'm so glad you brought up the point about the shorts. There are times when we are going through life and something will catch our eye and we go, "Oh, this is so great." I am not personally a fan of the conversation of needs versus wants because that gets too subjective.
Hmm.
And, I always have the argument of like, if it keeps you on this side of the dirt, it's worth the money,
Yeah.
period. And there are so many times, like I'll give a great example. I have a new dress that I bought. It was not something that was, wasn't looking for a dress, but it is exactly what I love to wear. It's got
Hmm.
the right kind of sleeves, it's got the right kind of neckline, it's the perfect length, it fits me beautifully. It's linen, and I live in Florida. Hello. So I bought it, and I happened to have a gift card to the store. It was, and again, wasn't intending on buying this dress, but it was not a regrettable or forgettable purchase
Hmm.
because it fit all this other criteria. And I
Hmm.
knew when I was standing there and I was looking at it, I'm like, this is something that I'm going to use a lot. It's something I'm
Hmm.
going to wear a lot. And it's exactly what I like. And it's going to bring me a lot of joy.
Hmm.
So it's important that we break out of these patterns of thinking, oh, I don't need it. I don't need it. Well, it's okay to want things. It
Yeah.
really is. It's okay to want things. And as long as you can cover it in your budget and it's not going to put you in a, tenuous situation, why not?
Hmm.
Right. So, I'm glad that you took that time to look and say, is this really what I want? Are these shorts exactly what I need right now? Is
Hmm.
this, and there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what? I'm going to sleep on it. If I still want it after 24 hours, I give myself permission to go buy it. Right.
Hmm.
So I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's such a important thing, especially when we're talking about spending triggers. Right.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. So my last question. Do we have to budget? What can we do if budgeting doesn't work for us?
Yeah. A lot of folks ask me this question because I think there's such a mentality out there about what a budget is. And that's
Hmm.
always my question. So when somebody's like, "Do I really have to budget?" I usually ask like, "Well, okay, what budgeting methods have you tried?" And most folks are like, "What do you mean budgeting methods?"
Yeah.
Because so many folks have one idea of what budgeting looks like, right? And many times the type of budgeting that they tried, and it's usually just one, maybe
Yep.
two, um, doesn't actually fit with their lifestyle or their personality. I
Hmm.
am not a person that can download a budget template from a website because most of the time the budget categories do not work with my life at all.
Right.
They do not fit into my lifestyle. So that's usually one piece of it, right?
Hmm.
And then the second question I usually ask is, what was the process that you used to create a budget? Now you'll notice, like I said earlier in the um, Money Mountain discussion, like Budgeting was not part of that foundational piece, right?
Mhm.
Budgeting is actually an outcome of many other skills that you need to master first.
Mhm.
So many times people just write out a list of expenses that they have and they think that they've created a budget. And that's just not how it works, right? Because
Mm.
so many times we forget different variable expenses, or we're not thinking about, oh, my friend's wedding is in 3 weeks and I'm going to have to
Oh
make sure to
yeah.
get a pair of shoes, for
Mhm.
that. Or, oh, I've got, this lunch date and what category does that come out of, right? So a lot of times people are not thinking through beyond just that list of expenses.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people too are kind of turned off by that word budgeting because it's sort of portrayed out in society and in culture as this like deprivation and austerity and like,
Yeah.
restriction, and that's the only way to budget. And the actuality is a budget, all it is just a plan or a map of where your money's going and flowing. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all it is. So I find that the reason a lot of people don't like to budget is because they either have a preset idea of what a budget looks like, and they don't know their numbers inside and out. And so their budgeting fails, it doesn't work because they don't really have an understanding.
Mm.
So before we ever create a budget, the first thing I would recommend anybody do, don't start a budget. Don't do it. Don't start there. The first thing you should do is go back and figure out where your money is already going and flowing.
Mhm.
Writing down, hey, I noticed that I'm spending, this much money every month on groceries, and that's a lot more than I thought it was going to be. Or, oh,
Mhm.
interesting. I had kind of forgotten about that, 2 months ago. I was going out with friends a lot and I spent a
Mhm.
lot of money on restaurants. What was that all about? Right.
Mhm.
So, getting clear about what your past expenses were is a really important part of it. This is why I have like a real numbers planner within. So, for anybody who's a Patreon supporter of mine, they get a monthly real numbers planner because it walks them through that process of figuring out what exactly is my money doing and then what do I want it to do instead. And I think that's really what I emphasize more than anything. Your budget can literally be, hey, I know these are the things that I'm going to have to pay for. This is every single month, it's the same thing. Rent's always this and utilities
Mhm.
are always that, right? We know what to expect. But hey, I've got this lunch date on the calendar. I've got, this trip to the zoo, in 2 weeks, or I've got what, and I don't want to spend more than, when I sit down and I have coffee with my friend Hannah, I don't want to spend more than $25, right?
Mhm.
That's all a budget really is. It's kind of making that plan and thinking a little bit ahead about where your money is flowing and going. And there's different ways to do that based on whether you have variable income, whether you have, really up and down kind of expenses.
Mhm.
There's just a lot of different methods to do it. So again, I really kind of, get my hackles up when somebody's like, oh, just make a budget. Okay. That's kind of like handing a kid a hammer and saying, oh, just go build a birdhouse,
Yeah, that's
right?
true. Yeah.
You got to teach people how to use these tools rather than just expecting that everybody knows that they just know it, right?
Right.
So, yeah, you don't have to use a budget the way that you think you have to use a budget. That's my final answer.
Gotcha. I'm glad you broke it down that way because that is the way I thought. And to be honest with you, when I heard the word budget, it caused me to like procrastinate, like downloading like a
Hmm.
template, and I would start writing stuff down. I'd be like, I'm not gonna, I'll do this tomorrow.
Yeah,
And
my budget is literally usually on like a little index card thing, and write out this is what I know I'm going to have because I know like these are my fixed expenses. This
mm-hmm,
is what I have to cover, and my income is variable as an entrepreneur. So I really plan. I'm like, okay, this is what I can do. This is the priorities. And
mm,
then, think, and sometimes the priority 1 month could be, yeah, I would love to go see my friend, but I really need to be putting more money away for saving this month.
mm-hmm.
Okay, when I go see them, instead of spending the $25 for coffee, I'm going to only let myself have a budget of $8, right?
Makes sense. Yeah. Gotcha. That's good advice. I'm writing some notes down as you're talking.
Yay! That makes my
Absolutely.
teacher heart so happy.
I love this. This is good. So, last, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave? I didn't know if you had any books out there that you would like to share or your contact information. Maybe someone
Yeah.
wants to schedule a consult with you or become a client for appointments. I would love for you to share that if you have anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest way to find everything about me is through my website, meadowsweetmoney.com. And I do one-on-one mentoring, but a lot of folks, I strongly recommend that if you're gonna, before you invest a lot of money in anything, I think it's really good to get to know me a little bit better.
Yeah.
Let's kind of see if we're a good fit. And you can do that through listening to my podcast, the Meadow Sweet Money podcast.
Hmm.
I also put out a lot of great information on Instagram, same, handle, Meadow Sweet Money.
Okay.
Um, and then you can find me. I do a twice a month newsletter on Substack now, which is really cool. And so you can find me there. And again, all that's on my website.
Okay.
But I do once a quarter a intro workshop. So if you're kind of more curious about that money mountain and that framework and getting more, into the weeds on that,
Hmm.
I have a free workshop that I do, and the next one's coming up on June 13th. So that's really exciting. And
Okay.
it's not a sales pitch. I don't do any gimmicky, nothing. It's not like a sales funnel or anything like that. It's literally me just like sharing this framework because I think it's so powerful.
Hmm.
And then you can ask me questions too, and you get a cool little workbook. And again, that's free. So I always say if you want to, get into the work that I'm doing, I definitely recommend start with the free stuff. And then, if you want more support, then we can talk about mentoring.
Okay, great. So what I will do in the description for YouTube, I'm going to make sure that I put your direct contact information so people can have access
Excellent.
to your podcast, Instagram, and everything. I'm
Great.
looking forward to the workshop. I'm going to sign up for that myself.
Yeah, please
And so,
do.
yes. So again, I want to just thank you for coming on today, and to the viewers who will be looking later on. I hope that you have found this episode very helpful. I did. And I hope that you will share it with someone who might benefit from it. So don't forget to subscribe and like a review on our YouTube page. And until next time, take care and keep striving for financial well-being. Thank you again for coming. Take care.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Take care. Bye-bye.